We'll see what understand. I just wanted to try something for y'all. Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. That's how you do it.
Who's in there?
Vegan mac and cheese.
You might like it.
It's amazing. It ain't that much going. It's spicy. They put that spicy.
If that is the
And it's got like a chicken. Like chicken marsala on the top. Bring it with me.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how much I respect that. Yes.
Right now.
I know you want Hey, Dr. Wood, I thought I was going to nice to see you.
Like responsible.
Just maybe. I wish you was gonna.
It's just that's amazing. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Facts. Word. Like the connectivity to the universe.
Energies. Everything alive. Yeah. I'm not that'll be consumed before I get there. Okay. All right.
We can't reduce ourselves to nothing more.
Oh, that's true.
Brandon, if you remember from mine, bear with me, thank you for all your choice. You have a selection of and also anything I want to change, you don't want to take it home.
It's amazing. That's it. Facts. You find a place.
Yeah.
I was texting with her today. She's official. She's official. And the connectivity. Kristen, the director of Power, emailed me today saying, I don't know if you know this, but my husband, Brian Short, he sat with you on the Delaware Correctional Reentry Commission Subcommittee on Economic Development. Loves your work. Loves what you do. Can we schedule next week for you to come out? I said, sure. She said, I don't want to wait on Kenyatta and Logan to coordinate calendars. I just want to link. What's up? So she's coming out next Thursday. Because she's like, I want to pick your brain on this stuff. He rocks efficient, all this stuff, and that's it. The business part. So, yeah. I think so. I think. Yeah. I gotta tell you, it's been on my soul since this morning.
I'm wondering if you can have
the DEI position at Reach.
so like
The range is 80 or 90. No. I had to just tell you. Right. I can't lose it. I can't. But I can't not tell you that would be
non-legal.
I don't want you to. I swear to God, listen, I'm telling myself, there's too much upward mobility and opportunity. But I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't tell you it's 80 to 90. And that's what we're doing. I don't want you to. I swear to God, I would be debilitated. Like, so, not even, there's no assistance. That's it. But
to understand this.
I wouldn't be me if I didn't say, yo, listen, check this out. I got kids on my chest.
But then they're not.
And I can't because I see a lot of it. And some of it is light, some of it really.
We have.
I'm not a respect. It makes my head sweat. The ball.
What?
I know.
There's a bunch of.
Can you guys hear okay? We're testing the volume.
Hello? 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 Can you guys hear me? Hello? Hello? Okay. As long as y'all mics are working, that's fine. I'm not going to be talking very long. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I am Tara Jones. I'm CEO of the CAT Center, Culture, Arts, and Technology Center. So welcome. I bring you greetings from the community. Again, I thank you all for sharing this moment. I'm sorry, this is nasty. So y'all mind if I pull it down?
Not at all.
I'm like, I'm 6 feet from here. Okay, thank you. The Culture, Arts, and Technology Center is the only one in this county and, of course, in the city of Chester. So the idea is to eradicate poverty through technology, through the arts, through education, and, of course, job development through our partners. And this is one of those times where we say, what's happening in the community and how can we be a part of it? So it's humbling for us to be that partner, and especially on this particular topic. I have to think back on Richard Tuck Carter, and I don't know if you all know Richard Tuck Carter, but he founded the Human Rights Coalition about a decade, more than a decade ago. And, you know, he came to me when I was at the YWCA and he said, Tara, I was in the system for 20 years, but I'm out now. I'm attending Widener University. I started this organization because when I got out, there's no resources, no help, nothing. I said, well, okay, I don't know how I can help, but you let me know what you need. And he said, we don't have a place for our office. And I said, okay, well, we have space. He said, but we can't pay rent. I said, well, what can you do? He said, well, the guys that I'm looking to help are skilled. So they redid our wooden floors,
They painted rooms. And that was our relationship, because I said, okay, if nobody else gonna give you a chance, you know, you guys come on in here and do what you gotta do. And that was a long time ago. He's passed on within a year. And I commend Jonathan, Brother Raheem. He got so many for being one of our lead champions in this. And I'm so proud. I just wanted to say, proud of you, brother, because he is the reason you are all here. Just a part of the puzzle. So I say thank you, and I say thank you to him. I say thank you to all of you in the work you have done and hopefully will do with all this new movement going on. I know there are some meetings happening, but I'm not sure how much movement is happening. So we're definitely looking and hoping for some movement, because as we'll hear, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening, but it's reaching the right people. So again, you know, I just say thank you. So I'm going to get out of your way. I just wanted to say the welcome, let you all know once again, there's food in the back. So y'all still didn't eat. Don't think I didn't see it. And if you don't eat now, again, please take it with you. Try it out. I know sometimes when you hear vegan, you're like, but she's actually, she's bomb. So just to let you know that. And the bathrooms are down the hallway here to the right, just to let you know where it is. And we were not able to do the temperature check, but you're spaced out and you all have it. We're good that way. Hand sanitizer, I think everybody went past that. If not, there's still some in the back. But just wanted to go over those few things. So you guys will be more comfortable, because you look a little tight. Relax, y'all, relax. I know some of you come from work, it's just like, this is not work, you're in the community, be comfortable. You're welcome here. You know, you're welcome, it's all good. I really believe we're gonna have some great information shared with us, and it's all good. If you're too hot, let me know that, because we can adjust the temperature. So again, no hesitation, you guys are comfortable, you guys are all welcome. And we're very much like a family around here, so it's okay. And so before I go, I would like to introduce the wise one, the owl, the mentor, the educator, the community leader, our Chester's former mayor, Dr. Mr. He's just all those things to us. Former Mayor Linder. Can we please give a round of applause?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Said wise one. I said the owl. I said who? Okay, y'all. Can you hear me through this microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to.
Put in your pocket. Oh, wise one.
I'm the wise one, but they tell me what to do. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank all of them for coming. Those who are in this room and those who are not here but looking in. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We have some business to take care of, and that's to get Jonathan and Blue Raheem King up here, and that's to also get Mr. Brandon Flood. Both of these guys, I'm so tickled myself inside, man, because they have just done some things. So I'm happy that this night has come, and they'll tell you all about what they're about. But just to recognize some of the people's offices that are represented here. Delaware County District Attorney's office is represented here. The Public Defender's Office of Delaware County is represented here. Thank you for coming. State Representative Kirkland's office, I believe, is represented here.
Yes.
The Warden of Delaware County Prison is here.
Yes.
My friend here, Mr. Cy Solomon, is here. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that. And, I met him recently, and I feel like we've been knowing each other for so long. A number of people that are online that are not here. You have coordinators of directions and so forth. And one person, I'm going to mention him by name. He's not here, but he has a long title, and someday Jonathan, we'll talk to him about it. That's Mr. Robert Reed, who is the Executive Deputy Director of Deputy Attorney General of Pennsylvania. So he's on the line. He's the wise one. He's looking over everything. So Rob, if you're looking in, welcome and thank you for attending. I just want to say a couple of things about this moment. When you all know that I was mayor, and I hired Raheem to be my community liaison. Like Tara said, he got a bunch of names. We call it Raheem, everybody's Jonathan. So I hired him to be my guy on the street. I needed some eyes on the street. I can't watch the whole thing. I knew that going in, but he and I had a relationship prior to that. And this has something to do with this night, but we're gonna have some more nights here. So some of the things that I'm about to say, I think we can all chime in and participate. We want to know how we can help. Sometimes we just got to do what's next. I said, Mr. Reed, how you doing? Keith? Good to see you. So Swarthmore College and Keith Reed, everybody knows him. But so I told him, I said, I had this picture of a chart, a schematic in my office. And I said, Raheem, I said, look at this. I said, put the chart up. I said, it had 5 stations. It had business and marketplace, it had home, home, school, college, and political arena, political community. I said, these 5 stations. I said, see this? He said, yes, sir. I said, this is the entrepreneurial community. He said, yes, sir. Because I know what he was thinking. He said, well, I'm an entrepreneur, so I know what the mayor said. And he went on to say, and he looked at that picture, and I knew he didn't recognize and understand everything I was saying. I'm a professor. I got theories, and so forth. But he shook his head, said, yes, yes, yes. But here's what I'm saying, what he did. He looked at it, and he didn't talk about it. He went out and did it. He did what I asked him to do. I said, we can conceptualize the community like this. And I want to get somebody in place in every one of these areas. He went out and did that. In the county, out of the county. When we had a chance to go to the state, he went to the state with him. And he put together some things that you'll hear about at some point. And I don't want to take too much more time up. But I just want to say this. I got him not because he had any kind of status. One of the things that connected us, he was a street guy. I wasn't the guy on the street, but I spent some time on the street. And there go I, were it not for the grace of God. There's some guys that are coming out of prison who've been in there 35, 45, 50 years. They were my boys. When we wasn't fighting with each other. We was all, so there go I, were it not for the grace of God. So I'm grateful. And I'm grateful that I was mayor and I could give him a job. And then because he got that job, this is why he did this job. And because he did this job, this is why we're here. So it didn't cost me nothing. It's not costing me anything now to be here. So I'm just going to stop by saying that we're all part of the entrepreneurial community. The entrepreneur in the community, in this community, in any community, we all are important. We all are not entrepreneurs, but we all have something to market. I don't know. Is that me? All right, it's time to get off. All right. That's the polite way to do it. We all have something to market. We all have something to give. And because we give it, and don't look for it to come back. It'll come back, and it'll come back in the form of Jonathan Abdul Rahim King, Syed Salman, Brandon, Flood, and you, all of you sitting out here. I haven't talked about the entrepreneurs from Chester. I got you, but not tonight. So I got to get off. But I'm proud to introduce Jonathan Abdul Rahim King. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hate this mic stuff, but I don't know if y'all can hear me.
Yeah. Now that's on.
That's lit.
All right, we good? Okay, so first thing I want to say is thank you all for coming. I'm a young guy from the city of Chester, been here like 55 years, and I have an opportunity to look at life from a different perspective. I'm not going to sit here and tell my whole story. Most of you in this room already know it. But to come from where I came from, and the mayor was being very, very nice and kind. Like we went from here to Washington, D.C. and did work a lot of places. This meeting is about us, right? People who have been incarcerated have never had an opportunity to voice who they really were as a human being because of the systematic thing that we got going on in this country. If you did your research and really look at what's going on now, it is changing, right? I can sit here and say that. Like, he can sit there and say it too. People like us are emerging. What I'm trying to bring to the table now, or to the atmosphere of the community now, is that it don't stop when we get out and we do well. I know most of you out there, a lot of you are doing well. I want to introduce the thing of this commutation and pardon and let you know how important it is. Like, it's like getting your life back. Once you go to prison, no matter what, depending on your status, people still will look at you like that ex-con. That word always exists. And it never changed for some people. But imagine a world where you do so much, right? Where you do so much that people don't even look at that anymore. I had the great opportunity to meet our president a few times, thanks to Mayor John Linder, and a whole lot of people who are in power. There's a lot of power in this room right now, right? Who have given me the opportunity to speak to them and talk to them and not tell me what we need and what we should have and how we should do something. I'm at the table, I ain't on the menu, right? So I get a chance to tell them what we need, right? We gotta start telling them what we need so we can get it right, so we can meet in the middle. We know that gun violence and all of these things are out of control. I had an opportunity to do work for a whole lot of things. And this meeting, it's not about me. It's about what I can do and how I can be used to expose the possibilities of what we can do as a community. This is why Brandon is here. This man is the secretary of the board of partners. He drove down here from Harrisburg. I want to let y'all know how big the deal is. He don't know that I know this, but he actually is going to he's going to do a joint in Philly tomorrow with Jordan Harris. I know that too, because we all communicate. He didn't have to come here. He came here because he cared. I put it together because I care. And we have to start moving forward on winning. Not individually having all this stuff, right? This stuff that really doesn't accumulate to anything, because when you die, you can't take stuff with you anyway. But let's create an atmosphere for people who are incarcerated now, getting ready to come home. I'm not going to run no stats on you because everybody here knows the stats. Most people in prison are going to come home. We know that. Let's do something about it before it happens. Because reentry, like Charlotte Plain says, and I know she's probably on this call, reentry is everybody's business. And with that being said, I'd like to introduce my colleague, my friend, my brother in reentry, Mr. Brandon Flood.
Guys. You guys hear me? All right, there we go. They're like Johnny Gill. So, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Come on, wake up.
I know.
So, as was mentioned, my name is Brandon Flood. I serve as the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. I was appointed to this post April 1st of 2019 by our 34th Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman. So, been in this role going on about 2 years now. I've had the pleasure to know your former mayor, Professor Linder. I actually met him during my time at SCI Chester. So for those of you guys know where I am now, but I also previously served 9 years in the Department of Corrections. I served 4 years as an 18-year-old, came home, knew very well that I was going right back into that life of crime, and then was subsequently arrested and convicted and sentenced to a 5 to 10 year sentence. And I had and I say this very intentionally, I had the pleasure of serving that 5 years at SCI Chester, because I always give them a shout out, because everyone thinks that every prison is the same, every SCI is the same. I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. Certainly SCI Chester is, I would say, if we had to have prisons, premier prison in Pennsylvania, right? And a lot of that is a number of reasons why that is. Geography is one reason, smack dab right in the city. Also, there's a ton of institutions of higher learning that are surrounding the institution. You're close to Philadelphia, so there were tons of folks that would come into that prison, volunteers, even Professor Linder. Whereas when you are in those rural prisons, you don't get that, right? You're lucky if you get maybe one or two faith-based organizations in that county, and then folks may come in. Whereas in Chester, there was no shortage of activities. Your mind, if you chose to engage, was always stimulated. They had yoga, for Christ's sake. Yoga, they had Pan-African studies, they had cultural awareness. That's actually where I met Professor Linder. They had debate classes, they had writing workshops. I had the pleasure of serving as the editor of the newsletter there for 3 years. So, that was really where I kind of, even when I was engaged, and this is true for all of our young people, I was always good. I excelled academically when I paid attention, right? The smarts were there, the foundation was there. I had the other pleasure of being raised by a single father, whereas usually that dynamic when we talk about young Black and brown males is the opposite. They're raised by a single mother, right? So I was raised by a single father who was college educated, military man, actually worked for the Commonwealth himself, Department of Health and Welfare as their comptroller. So I had all of the foundation there. I just chose not to use it, right? But it was only until I went my time at SCI Chester where those confluence of not only programs, but also positive people too. One last Friday, Lieutenant Governor and I, we did a press conference in Pittsburgh around the second felony murder rule in Pennsylvania. For those of you that aren't familiar with the felony murder rule, and I know Jonathan talked about, he alluded to commutation. So what the felony murder rule is in Pennsylvania is if you are an accomplice during the commission of a crime where that results in the death, in the commission of a felony that results in someone's death. It doesn't matter your proximity, doesn't matter your involvement, just being merely an accomplice is enough to subject you to life without parole. And there's about 1,200 people in Pennsylvania who were sentenced under that sentencing scheme, right? And then beyond that, the vast majority of them are from southeastern Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. So, for us, these are literally people who were getaway drivers, right? It doesn't even matter if you were a mile away from the actual theater of the crime. Someone who was that far removed from an offense is serving the rest of their natural life in prison. So those are things that, for me, that's why I got bit by the political bug at Chester. And, I don't really consider myself an overly religious person, but I do consider myself a spiritual person. And the irony is, when I was at SCI Chester, the then superintendent, I can't remember John. What was John's name? John, the black guy. John Thomas, black guy. Which, again, that's another rarity when you talk about prisons, right? I can probably count on one hand how many superintendents at state correctional institutions there are statewide. And, certainly we disagreed on a lot of things, but he definitely was part of the impetus for why you had a lot of those outside organizations coming in. So what I was going to say was that for whatever reason, Superintendent Thomas asked me to introduce who at the time I had no clue who he was. And, he recently passed, most of you know, former Senator Stuart Greenleaf. So Stuart Greenleaf came to the institution, said, Brandon, we got the senator coming up. Would you mind introducing me? I said, I don't know who he is. At that time, I couldn't tell you the difference between city council and Congress. That's how politically inactive I was. But for whatever reason, he wanted me to do that. So the librarian gave me a ton of information on Senator Greenleaf, and it was reading his own story. For those of you that didn't have the pleasure of meeting Senator Greenleaf spent most of his time as a prosecutor. He very much, at one point in time, he he subscribed to the notion that, lock him up, throw away the key, and for a while he thought that a lot of these, to John's point.
Move it away from your beard.
Is that
Yeah, come out, yeah.
to John's? Oh, all right, okay, there we go. Should have told me that 5 minutes ago. But it was reading his story, right, where I told you his mantra early on was lock him up, throw away the key. He viewed a lot of folks that entered that penal system as being irredeemable, right? But it was only, kind of halfway into his tenure with the legislature that he had that aha moment that what we're doing isn't working. What we're doing isn't decreasing the prison population. What we're doing isn't reducing recidivism rates. What we're doing isn't decreasing violence in communities and in our urban corridors. So he reversed his mantra, and I'm proud to say that he was the most strident advocate for criminal justice reform in that legislature. All you had to do is look at his co-sponsorship memos. Usually, and this is no shade to the other state legislators, but one way to kind of tell whether your legislator is worth their salt is looking at their co-sponsorship memos. You can go to a site that's called the Legislative Data Policy Processing Center, LDPC. You can literally look up what your legislator has introduced in terms of policy. I mean, Senator Greenleaf, easily 50 substantive bills every legislative session. You have some folks that introduce resolutions like, designating Pennsylvania's, the pretzel as the Pennsylvania snack, not really substantive policy, whereas with Senator Greenleaf, that's all that he introduced, and it was all centered around reforming our criminal justice system. So it was reading his story, and it was also his own remarks to the prison population that really, he drove the point home that, hey, listen, my colleagues that aren't as sympathetic as I am in Harrisburg want to keep you where you are. They want to keep you in that vicious cycle. They want you to be subject to those collateral consequences. So you need to equip yourself with the knowledge of how policy works, how the legislative process works, and no longer allow yourself to be subjected to that, right? And for me, again, we talk about, me being a spiritual person. I had the good pleasure of going back, Jonathan mentioned I'm from Harrisburg. So after being bitten by that political bug, there wasn't a better place for me to return back to than Harrisburg, right? Harrisburg's the epicenter of politics in Pennsylvania, right? And then beyond that, once I started to educate myself about the legislature and its functions, I learned, hey, there's 253 legislators here. So I'm trying to scare up an internship. I have pretty good odds, right? 253 folks. Either I'm not worth my salt if I can't get at least one internship out of 253. And luckily for me, probably about maybe 2-3 months after being released from prison, I ended up getting an internship with the Philly legislator, former Representative Frank Oliver Sr. He, again, and another bit of irony, you heard me talk about my father used to work for the Department of Health and Human Services when they were merged. Representative Oliver was the chair of Health and Human Services Committee. So I got that internship. I tried to absorb as much as I could. One thing that I said upon being released, because I've talked about how much time I served in the adult system, but that also was preceded by time that I spent in juvenile system, right? Year in placement, boot camps, detention centers. So the one thing from that point, I said, here I was leaving prison at 28, and from 28 to about maybe from 16 to 28, I hadn't spent the whole calendar year on the street. And for me, so I said, I'm at least give myself one calendar year to do the right thing, right? Because at the end of the day, if things don't work out, trying to go the positive route, the streets, whether you love them or hate them, will always be there. And luckily for me, a lot of things started happening probably within that 3-month mark upon being released. And then I ended up getting extended a full-time position. It was another Philly legislator who I owe a lot of my success to. Her name is former Representative Vanessa Lowry Brown. And she brought me on as her legislative assistant and really allowed me to, kind of spread my wings. And she gave me a lot of latitude. And you don't have to get that when it comes to elected officials. Usually it's kind of like, if you remember the old Suge Knight video where he talks about P. Diddy wants the producer wants all the shine. That's how the elected officials are. They want to be the ones at the forefront. They are the ones that want the credit, usually. Whereas her, she didn't care. She was more results oriented, outcomes oriented. So she didn't really care who got the shine as long as the work got done. And for me, that really allowed me to, cut my teeth, really be able to, fashion myself as a policymaker. And I was able to leverage that experience as her legislative assistant and move on to do some other things. So ended up spending about 8 years working for the legislature, different capacities, research analyst. Also served as the executive director of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus for about 4 years. And that really helped me out too, because that got me to see the rest of the Commonwealth. So, we dealt with every issue that adversely impacted Black and brown communities across the Commonwealth. So that only opened me up to other opportunities, other networking opportunities, other policy issues, because we have to think about it, right? Philadelphia is well represented in terms of, and a little bit of Southeastern PA is well represented when it comes to Black and brown folks within the legislature. There's tons of pockets of places across the Commonwealth that have, something I found out probably about 8 years ago. The Poconos has a very significant,
wow.
What is it, a Caribbean population, which I didn't know. They actually have an NAACP in the Poconos, believe it or not. But you wouldn't know that, right? And a lot of them don't have that person that's lobbying for them. So that was something that opportunity with the Black Caucus really allowed me to engage a lot of those communities, really find out where what the needs were, and then be able to formulate policy to address those needs. So I said I spent time with the legislature about 8 years, and then I left and tried to cut my teeth in private industry. So I worked as the legislative director for SEIU, Service Employees International Union. They serve as the second largest public sector union in Pennsylvania. At that point, I just wanted to kind of leave the General Assembly. I got a little tired of how things were, and admittedly, our leadership there. And then, I also wanted to be able to, expand my horizons. So I went there, worked there for about a year, and then I came back to the Commonwealth and worked for the Department of General Services. And we talked about entrepreneurship. So I worked for the Department of General Services in their Bureau of Diversity, Inclusion, and Small Business Opportunities. I served as their policy and reporting specialist. So our primary goal was when it comes to state contracting. As you all know, Commonwealth spends billions of dollars a year on procurement. However, Black and brown folks aren't necessarily well or proportionately represented when it comes to those contracts, because it comes down to information, right? Or that's why it's important that Jonathan holds these kind of events, because it's not because of lack of aptitude or the lack of that folks aren't prepared to take advantage of those opportunities when they emerge. But if you don't know about them, right? If you don't know how to navigate that process, then you're behind the 8 ball. So that was something that really, I found beneficial and really helped to round me out. And then, in the course of serving in that capacity, that's when Lieutenant Governor won his election. And then I got, and even that was kind of serendipitous. When he won, I didn't ask him. Literally, my email to him was, "I'm not looking for a job." Right? This is right after the election. Any of you that have ever worked elections or been candidates, usually your surrogates want a job, right? Or they want some, for their hard work knocking doors and working polls. Usually those are the kind of calls, and I didn't want him to think that was the kind of call that I was reaching out to him about. Actually, I was supposed to be starting a position with the governor, overseeing African American affairs for the state, and I was reaching out in that capacity. Literally, my start date was January 23rd of 2019, and part of the thing what Jonathan said earlier, especially when it comes to reentrance, is what was helpful for me is, and any of you that have ever are familiar with my story and read that Inquirer article, I didn't really tell anybody. Like, even the people I was close to, it was about 9. Even I talked about former Representative Brown. She found out 10 years later that, and I worked for her for 6 years. But part of that was, and I was very intentional about that, because I didn't want to be labeled as the ex-con, right? Or I didn't want opportunities to be limited, right? I didn't want someone to second guess, hey, let's not give the ex-con this project, or can the ex-con really handle this project, or does he have the experience? All of those kind of questions I didn't want those to arise. I wanted folks to judge me based upon my work product and my reputation, right? So my goal was definitely, I talked about wanting to get into government, but I wanted to get as deep into state government as possible before my record was broached, right? Not because I was ashamed about it, but I wanted to be able to have that track record built up. So when you do get appointed to the board of pardons, right? The one thing that no one could, my qualifications were unassailable, right? You can say whatever you want about me, my character, or my past, but my qualifications, you couldn't object to those, or say that this person was disqualified or wasn't qualified for the position. So that was part of the goal, and I usually encourage every reentrant to do the same thing. Don't lead with that. A lot of people lead with that and screen themselves out, right? We all know how negative stereotypes work, but there's a such thing as positive stereotypes too, right? So if I come in with glasses and bow ties and a nice suit, the assumption isn't that I'm an ex-con, right? The assumption, at least in the legislature, and at least on Capitol Hill, was that I was an attorney or that I had some kind of Ivy League background. So, and I ran with that, right? I allowed you to think that. But not only allow you to think that, I also was able to live up to that notion you had of me. So that's why I usually encourage every other person to do the same thing. It's a little bit different with the legislature because, ironically, when you apply for a position with the legislature, or at least in my case, in Harrisburg, I interviewed with HR and security. I had to tell them. They knew my stuff. But your actual legislator doesn't sit unless they want to. They don't sit in there. So that was the only thing that HR told them, was that he's approved and can start. He can start in 2 weeks. So that was the one benefit, because I got from a lot of people, how were you able to get that job with your record, right? And and I had 2 felony convictions. I said, I served 9 years collectively for possession with intent to deliver cocaine in possession of an unlicensed firearm. And for me, and this is one thing I also want to emphasize too, I talked about being able to use stereotypes positively, but we also need to familiarize ourselves with the law, right? We talked about that knowledge gap and how that can negatively impact you. So the one thing I did know during my time behind the wall, and especially after that chance meeting with Senator Greenleaf, was that Pennsylvania has what's known as the Criminal History Record Information Act. That's the controlling statute that dictates to employers how they can use criminal history information when they're screening you for employment. So what the Criminal History Record Information Act says is that employers can only use felony convictions and misdemeanor convictions to the extent that they relate to the position that you're applying for. So there has to be some correlation. Essentially, there's a suitability standard there, right? So now, obviously, if I had child abuse charges or crimes against children, certainly I wouldn't be able to work in the child care sector. Same thing if I was convicted of embezzlement, then certainly there would be a lot of opportunities choked off in the financial sector. But for possession with intent to deliver cocaine, that there is no direct correlation between that and being a legislative assistant. And in many cases, right, unless you're going to be a pharmacist, there really is no direct correlation when it comes to that. But a lot of people don't know that, right? So that's great that that's on the books, but one of the biggest deficiencies with the statute is there's really no enforcement of it, right? So there's the Attorney General's office, other than Mr. Reed's here, the Attorney General's office literally has one person for the entire state who deals with PREA matters, and that's the acronym, Criminal History Record Information Act. One person to deal with that. And what that statute also says is that, so I told you about what they can consider. So felonies and misdemeanors. They can't even consider arrest. They can't consider pending charges. And then the other part of that law says is that they have to, and if they do disqualify you because of that conviction, it has to be provided in writing. Now, a lot of employers don't provide it in writing. Even me telling you verbally or over the phone that you were disqualified because of your conviction technically is violative of PREA, right? And a lot of employers don't do it, especially small mom and pop shops, is because they may not be knowledgeable of law. But a lot of the big players, the big corporations know, and a lot of times why they don't provide you with that writing is because essentially it arms you, right? Because the other part of CREA says, what is the penalty? There's a civil penalty for any employer that doesn't use that screens someone out unfairly. And it says it's a civil penalty up to from $100 to $10,000 per offense. Now, most folks, you have to file your own suit, right? And most folks aren't going to do that. Usually they'll just take the no and keep it moving. So you hardly have any people that really challenge an employer who disqualifies them. And that's where I say about the lack of enforcement piece. You have one person for the whole state. And if people in I'm sure even in Chester alone, on any given day, there's probably at least 20 people denied unfairly, right? Just in Chester alone. So that's something that we're looking at working at, and that's something that I use to my advantage too. So I was going into interviews and going into applying for positions, waiting for them to try to cite my record, right? But that's part of being knowledgeable and understanding and allowing and making the law work for you. So that's my story, how I got to this position. And let me tell you a little bit about how executive clemency works in Pennsylvania, because some people, a lot of people, even a lot of our policymakers aren't familiar with what executive clemency is, the functions. We oftentimes get conflated with probation and parole. But we've been around since 1872. There were some people, there were a few legislators when I first got appointed that they see me in the Capitol building and would say, hey man, I think it's great that the lieutenant governor created this position for you. It's like, no, this position's been around forever, but it speaks to the lack of knowledge. But it has to do with lack of knowledge, but it also has to do with our process, and still is to some extent, a very archaic process. Right? So you didn't have a lot of people receiving pardons. I know myself. I guess I did gloss over that. I did receive a pardon myself, March of 2019. And that was a thing. That's actually how I ended up getting the job. Remember I said I reached out to the lieutenant governor and said, hey, I'm not looking for a job. I said, hey, I'm starting a new job. Now he just knew me as I like to say, Urkel brain. He knew me as the policy dude. He had nothing about the background. So, and we knew each other. I knew him when he first ran for U.S. Senate, which he's actually running for again now. So I would always send him policy recommendations. I actually send them to all of the candidates for lieutenant governor because I knew one of them would be elected, right? And at the end of the day, whoever that person was, I wanted to be able to assist them. So when I told him that, I said, hey, listen, I don't need a job. I'm actually going to be starting a new job. And he was like, all right. And I said, hey, well. And then I ended the call with, hey, it may also interest you to know that and at that time I was literally just waiting for the governor to sign my part. So it was him, he put two and two together and said, hey, listen, man, first he offered me a job. And, admittedly, it wasn't secretary, and it was $1,000 less than I was making now. And I said, listen, brother, I already told you I was looking for a job, number one. And then secondly, I'm sure enough that I'm not going to take $1,000 less. So I told him that and said, listen, I'm here to help. So, I appreciate the offer. And then, a week later, he countered with the secretary position. And, and obviously I couldn't turn that down. And, ironically, too, I'm a very hands-on person. So even when I was going through this process as an applicant for clemency, I knew the secretaries very well. I knew my two predecessors very well, spent a lot of time in that office. That's the one irony I say about my staff now, right? When I used to come in there as an applicant, luckily none of them, they didn't treat me poorly or we always had a good rapport. So and that goes to show, right? You never know who your boss may be, right? You should always treat people with respect, no matter if the person's an applicant or whether they're a dignitary. But so I told him that, hey, listen, I wasn't looking for a job. And then I told him about, me getting the pardon. He was the one that put two and two together. And as I said, I spent time with my two predecessors, just trying to navigate the process, getting more information about how things function. So when I got the offer, I actually reached out to my, so the predecessor, not the immediate predecessor, but the one before that. And it was actually an African-American woman named Mavis Nemo, who was secretary. And Mavis and I are friends to this day. So I told Mavis, hey, listen, I just got this offer. And Mavis told me, well, I told her I had two offers, right? As the governor's job and then this. And Mavis said, I wouldn't take the secretary job unless See, and she told me it's a lot of work, right? Because here we are trying to reform a system that's been in place and very much it's been in its same form for 150 years. And then, it's not like I can unilaterally make changes. I can come up with the policy ideas, but at the end of the day, we have a 5-member board that has to approve or assent to whatever changes that are being proposed. And then more importantly, as you know, millions of folks have criminal records, right? We have historically been understaffed. So she said, it's a lot of work there. So I would caution you against taking this if, unless you plan on, it can be added, So, but I also knew this too. We talked about, and Professor Linder and I talked about this when we sidebar early. He talked about giving back, coming back, right? I didn't just get my success and then not come back, right? So for me, it was the ability to be able to pay it forward. And more importantly, right? I don't like staying in one place for one spot. I mean, for a long time anyway. I like to be able to get somewhere, make the impact, and where I feel like either if I'm encountering resistance where I can no longer make an impact, or that there's someone else who I should be grooming to be even more impactful to succeed me, you move on, right? Especially to be able to get more folks like myself or Black and brown folks as decision makers. You should be grooming folks to succeed you, right? So I've never been one to rest on my laurels, and I'm not one of those people. Even when I first came into government, all I would hear, any government workers here too? Yeah, most of you. So many of you have heard this phrase, and it was foreign to me, because mind you, like I said, was 2 months removed from prison before I started interning and then serving as a legislative assistant with the legislature. But I would hear all of the employees, or a good number of them, only got 20 more years, man. Only got 16 more years. They're counting the clock, right? And we're looking at it's 5 o'clock, 4:59, click up, I'm logged out, right? So you had a lot of people that really didn't have a passion for these jobs, right? They were either good paying jobs, the benefits, especially with the capital, the great benefits, and a lot of people just treated them as jobs, right? They weren't labors of love or passion for them. Whereas for me, that was the case for me, but more importantly, as a reentrant, I wanted to go harder than my competitors, right? I wanted to be the first one in, I wanted to be the last one out. So I made it a point. I felt like, to some extent now, I still feel like I'm compensating for those 9 years I spent, right? And I wouldn't say that I squandered that time, but certainly they could have been used more constructively. So, that was kind of the mindset for me. And like I said, the Lieutenant Governor saw that vision. And, for me, I couldn't pass up that opportunity. And especially with the Lieutenant Governor, he turns out, and even my own boss told me not to take it too at the time with the Department of General Services. He said, it's an appointed position, man. When the Lieutenant Governor leaves, they don't have to pick you up, man. You got security here. And that was true, right? But again, I wasn't looking to stay here for 10 and 20 years. I want to be able to maximize the opportunity. So we've been able to get a lot done, which I'll talk about over these last 2 years. And, and admittedly, even with our board, right? This is a culture shock for a lot of them, especially our more seasoned board members. So much change in a little bit of time. None of us really like change, right? So here you got some new guy coming and saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that, or we're going to change this. I have to be a little bit judicious and pick my battles. There's tons of things I want to do, but I can't overload our board, right? And I want them to buy into the change as well, too, right? I just don't want your approval. I want you to believe in the changes that are being proposed. So that's my story of how I got here and why I do what I do. So let's talk about what executive clemency is. So executive clemency, and there's a lot of terms to contend with. Clemency, pardons, commutations, expungement, sealing, so a lot of folks can get confused. So executive clemency is defined as the executive branch, which is the governor, is empowered to extend mercy or forgiveness to anyone that's been convicted of a crime in Pennsylvania. So think of executive clemency as the umbrella term, mercy, forgiveness for anyone that's been convicted of a crime. Now, executive clemency is made up of 2 parts. Jonathan talked about pardons, which most of us are familiar with. What pardons do, the easy way to remember what pardons are is pardons remove the record completely. It used to be about 80% of the folks that applied for executive clemency, they were applying for pardons. Given COVID and just the changing dynamics, now it's about 50-50. We get 50% of the applications we get are for pardons, and then the other 50% are for commutations. Commutations have actually increased quite significantly, and a lot of that does have to do with COVID, right? And so I talked about pardons as one side that removes the record completely, and then the other side of the clemency coin is commutations. So commutations is defined as the modification or the reduction of one sentence. So think of someone that has been sentenced to life without parole, who wants their sentence commuted to life on parole, or think of someone who may have been excessively sentenced, who wants to commute their minimum sentence to a lower numerical number, or think on the back end, tail. There's any judges in the house here? Well, I know there's some prosecutors here, so you know what I'm about to say. When there's some very wonky sentences out there, right? You have some people serving 2 to 40 sentences. There literally was a guy serving 2 to 40 for stealing a golf cart. And initially came, I think he got like 20 years IP, and ended up the intermediate punishment, and ended up violating it, and it all ended up being a 2 to 40. So, and it also allows you to commute your maximum sentence, and it also allows you to commute your parole. We have some people that are serving quite some time on parole, and certainly have demonstrated that they're not a risk to public safety. They've been able to comply with what was asked of them from parole for decades sometimes, and certainly they're deserving. So that's what that is. Executive clemency, mercy, forgiveness, two sides, pardons, commutations. So you heard me talk about, now I'm not the ultimate decision maker when it comes to these applications. We have a 5-member board who are the ones that actually vote on these applications. So 2 of our board members are constitutionally appointed. The lieutenant governor, who serves as our chairperson, he serves as chair for as long as he holds his office as lieutenant governor. And then our attorney general serves on the board. He serves as a board member for as long as he holds his office. And then there's 3 other board members that constitutionally, in terms of what expertise they have to have, that's outlined. So we have to have a corrections expert, we have to have a victim representative, and then we have to have a psychologist. So that's who comprises our 5-member board. That's who ultimately makes the decisions on these applications, or at least, and they're not even technically not even the ultimate decider. So Pennsylvania is a little bit unique. We have what's known as a gatekeeper system when it comes to clemency. There's some states where the governor can unilaterally, kind of like on the federal level with how Trump issued pardons unilaterally. Some states, the governor can do that. Here in Pennsylvania, the governor cannot act on any application for clemency unless it's recommended to him by the board. So part of my job is overseeing the agency, the administration side of it, the intake of applications, the processing of applications, the scheduling of hearings, and then obviously driving our policy. So part of why I was brought on was to make this process more efficient. Anyone here ever go through the pardon process or executive clemency process? Successfully or pending?
Successfully.
Successfully. Okay.
2018.
Right. So, well, congratulations to you. How about yourself?
Successfully.
Congratulations. Give him a hand. Give him a hand. Oh, that's the one you saw. Okay, yeah, it's top line. So yeah, I mean, and they deserve a round of applause because certainly you guys obviously had applied during the time when it was really a very rigorous process, right? And a lot of people were turned off by the process because they used the applicant. There was so much responsibility on the applicant, so many hoops you had to jump through, and furthermore, just the language that we use. We used to go to our website, very intimidating, even for someone who worked for the legislature for a decade. When I was completing my own pardon, I found it to be a very tedious process. And actually, back then, I applied 2015. And back then, if you made one error, and in my case, they send it back, just like Monopoly, go to jail, start over, the $200. And for me, literally, I transposed numbers. I think it was a 9, that should have been a 6, and they rejected it. And at that time, I said, and again, I knew the secretary. I said, you know what? I've been pretty successful this far. I'm not putting in for that again, man. And I didn't. I let a whole year go by, and it was when actually Secretary Nemo was on her way out. She was the one saying, hey, listen, man, I get that you you found, you had a bad experience the first time, but I seriously would implore you to put in. And I did, and thankfully I heeded her advice. But the point I'm making is it was a very rigorous process, and a lot of people didn't pursue this. And one of the half-truths about this process, too, was that it was an expensive process, right? So it wasn't so much expensive if you pursued this process on your own. Technically, on average, about $63 technically if you did it yourself. However, most people found it so complex that they outsourced it. And no offense to our attorneys here, they felt like they had to outsource it to an attorney. You have attorneys that would charge anywhere between $5,000 and $7,500. So that's hell of a markup, right? Right. So that's where So that was one of the first things that we wanted to do. Both the Lieutenant Governor and I, we wanted to remove that financial barrier, right? Even that $63 for some people was a barrier, right? Because the pardoning process isn't an instantaneous process, a very deliberate process, about 3 years right now. We do have some expedited lanes that take about 1 year and 18 months, depending upon your conviction, but 3 years for standard commutations and pardons, right? So shelling out $63 for something that is, and number one, and then secondly, it's not a guarantee. Shelling out $63 for something that's going to take 3 years, and there's no guaranteed outcome. So some folks may say, listen, man, I can pay this Geico bill or this light bill, that's probably be a better use than paying the Board of Pardons. So we wanted to remove that. And then secondarily, what we wanted to do, you heard about us talking about, you heard me talk about how complex it was. So we didn't just want to remove the fee without looking at the actual application and the instructions, right? So for me, my mantra was I wanted to make this kind of like what the old Geico commercial, so easy, a caveman and a cavewoman could do it. That's what I wanted this pardoning process to be, right? So the first thing we did was we overhauled the application. We removed as much legalese as possible so that the average layperson who didn't necessarily have a legal background can understand the document and be able to fill it out correctly. And for us too, it was a time saver for us too. As an agency, we spent too much time trying to take corrective action. And that's why we used to reject people for just one little mistake, because it was inefficient for us to follow up and say, hey, do this, do that. So we wanted to kind of make it foolproof. We have a tutorial on our website. The other thing we did is we overhauled our website. You go to our website now, dramatically different, tons of resources, very user-friendly. Even has information about knowing your rights for employment, that CREA stuff. So for, although I serve as secretary for the Board of Pardons, I kind of wade into any and all waters that are criminal justice related, right? So it's not just clemency stuff on our website. There's stuff that people can find useful, or stuff that people can find useful while they're waiting, right? What are we? People still need jobs while they're waiting for those 3 years, right? So we wanted to be able to provide those resources. So we overhauled that application, made it very simplified. We have a video tutorial. We are going to be transitioning to an online application too. So that was something too. Historically, we've always been a paper-based agency, and that also accounts for why it takes 3 years too. So that was one of the first things, being able to leverage my background with the legislature and be able to, as part of my job also is, we need money. I want to expand this office. There should be, last year we had 2,100 people apply. Historically, prior to 2019, we never had more than 570 people apply per year. So 2,100 people, in my opinion, there should be 20,000 people applying every year, right? But we can handle that capacity, and folks will be waiting 10 years if we had those 20,000. So I want to put that infrastructure in place, because we hear especially from the politicos, about how they want to address mass incarceration. I think one of the ways to address, so to speak, right? Because you have tons of people that conviction. So, it should be 20,000 people. So part of us, so part of what we're doing is we're going online. We're projected to do that December of this year or January of 2022. We have a a modernization work group that we convened. We actually have the former IT person from Foot Locker who was leading up our, no Foot Locker discounts either. I asked her. But she's leading up our effort, and certainly this isn't something that is a novel attempt on our part. From what I'm told from my predecessors, we tried to do this 3 times prior, but it just never worked out. So, now we have projection dates. We're already testing models. We have demos that we're running. So we're very excited about that. And that, we hope, will draw a lot of people in who should be applying. Most of the people that I encounter who are in, hey, what's up? Most of the people that I encounter who are interested in the clemency process are better candidates than I was, right? And there's a lot of people that are like, why didn't you apply 10 years ago? So there's a lot of people who don't apply just because of that paper-based aspect of it. So now that was one of the mandates that the Lieutenant Governor made upon me. He said, I want people to be able to fill out and submit a pardon through their handheld device or smartphone. And I'm happy to say that we will, at least as of right now, we will be at that point, December of this year or January of 2021. All right, so real quick, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over process, and then I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna do a very truncated version of how the process works, and then we'll open up for questions, because I'm sure a lot of your questions may relate to what I will be presenting anyway. So process-wise, how it works currently is you will go to our website, you would download the application. The application instructions are already there for you. Again, there's a tutorial that will literally walk you through each section of the application. It's virtually foolproof. The other thing that you have to do, and this is the most difficult part, and it's not really difficult, is obtaining court documents. So there's 6 required court documents that you would have to get from the clerk of courts. We have that listed in the instructions. One of the things that I've done in this role is every year I go to the Clerk of Courts and Prothonotary Association's annual conference, because we've always worked collaboratively, and even as an applicant. And some of you former applicants know, a lot of those people at those clerk of courts weren't necessarily too friendly, right? And there's a lot of counties that never dealt with clemency before. So going and asking for certain documents, it's almost like you're speaking Mandarin to them, right? And it's really held up a lot of people. So making sure we're on the same page, letting the clerk of courts and the Prothonotaries know what changes have been made on our landscape, how we can do things better, and that ultimately has resulted in a much better experience for the applicant. So you get those court documents and you would just submit it to us. That's literally all you have to do. The former applicants here could tell you that you get tons of documents and have to pay out your pocket to get those documents. Whereas for me, I say, hey, listen, we can get these documents with a click of a mouse. Why are we asking applicants to do that? So these are things that there's tons of inefficiencies that we're trying to root out. So you will submit the court documents with your application. You'll send it to us. Probably about 3 weeks, you will get a response from us saying that we have receipt of your application. And then at that time, we will tell you if there's anything problematic, any errors, anything incomplete. And the other thing that we do now too is if you made too many errors, we just ask you for permission to just fill it out for you, right? Because we spent too much time back and forth, and you could have just knocked it out right then and there, as opposed to asking Johnny to do it and have a waste and stamp. So you would do that. We would let you know it's complete. It usually takes about a year at that point to do what's called a detailed review, and then we file the application. When we file the application, that application goes to the district attorney, president judge, probation and parole, who by statute, they conduct our background investigations. So once it's filed, right now, usually about 12 months to 18 months after it's filed, someone from probation and parole will conduct what's known as a present status interview. Those used to be done in person. Those are done telephonically now, or probably via Zoom. For our marijuana cases, we actually just send them a questionnaire, and there isn't any interview. So at that point, once probation and parole does their background investigation, they give us a report. We do an analysis of that report. So essentially what we're doing is distilling the salient facts that the board members need to make an informed decision on your application. At that point, we schedule you for what's known as a merit review hearing. It's kind of like a preliminary hearing in the judicial world. So much like the name suggests, the merit review hearing is only to determine whether your application merits you getting a public hearing. And that's the one that's for all the marbles. How the vote protocols work for merit review: unless you are incarcerated for crime of violence, sentenced to life or death, you only have to get 2 out of 5 votes from the at the merit review in order to get a public hearing. If you fall into any of those aforementioned categories, you have to get 3 out of 5. Then once you get the public hearing, at least with COVID, right? So for me, we're holding hearings virtually now, and if it's left up to me, we'll continue to hold hearings virtually, even when COVID is long and gone, just because it's a more efficient process, right? And for us, September of 2020, that was our first time attempting that historically, and that was quite an ordeal there, right? Because you had a lot of people who weren't familiar with how to use Zoom. It was a lot of troubleshooting, and plus we were very aspirational at that point. We tried to hear 200 cases virtually, and we probably got about halfway through before we had to say, hey, we had to postpone. So those hearings are held virtually. One of the changes that we made is that it used to be historically everyone had to appear for the hearing. Doesn't matter how long ago your crime was. Doesn't matter how venial your offense was. It mattered, and we literally had people coming from Seattle to Pennsylvania for 3 minutes for a case we already knew was a slam dunk. So what we do now, so for me, I said, hey, why aren't the votes mattering, right? The votes should mean something. If someone gets a 5-0 versus a 3-2, that should mean something. There should be a benefit for that 5-0 other than that person just receiving an affirmative vote. So what we're able to get our board to do is, when it comes to nonviolent, non-sexual cases that receive either 5-0 or 4-0 vote, we have the prerogative to excuse them. And we allow the board, if the board needs to see them, they can object to us excusing. But by and large, and that allows us to hear more cases per session too, right? So, we plan on ramping things up, and that was part of one of the changes. So public hearing, if you are requested to appear, the board would ask any questions that they have of you. What we would do is at some point we would recess, come back out, and then we'll call the vote right then and there. So you would be able to see what the vote is. And then at that point, your application is recommended to the governor, and then the governor can decide whether to sign or to concur with the board's recommendation to deny it or just not act on it. One of the things, and then I'll turn it over to Q&A, that folks need to be mindful of, and that we're actually working on too, is, and this is the thing too, we talked about this being a process that's been around for 150 years and very archaic and really no changes being made. So even when it came to the governor, right? So the governor is not required by statute to act on your application with any specified time period. So if he or she wants to wait 3 years or wait till the last day of their administration, they can, or they can actually leave their office and just leave your application in limbo. But one of the things we're trying to do, again, make the votes matter. So what we're trying to do, or what we're not trying, what we are going to do is we want there to be a more standardized turnaround time, right? Especially for people with pardons. A year, we had some people waiting a year after it's been recommended to the governor. From your face, you probably were one of them. Yep. A year, that's a long time, right? And we're essentially not allowing folks to maximize their potential, their earning potential over the course of a year. For a lot of cases that really are slam dunks. Again, so what we're doing now, or what I propose to the governor's office, is kind of like we do for excusing applicants from having to appear. Governor, you shouldn't have to vet these applications. If it's a nonviolent, non-sexual case that's a 4-1 or 5-0 vote, those are pretty much slam dunks. And then even statistically, right? This isn't just Brandon saying arbitrarily, let's do this. The data undergirds that, right, and supports it. That this governor has concurred with our board's recommendations 99% of the time, and 100% of the time for nonviolent, non-sexual cases. So it's just about doing things more efficiently, kind of thinking outside of the box, and that's proved beneficial for us thus far. But again, there's tons of room for improvement, and certainly I welcome ideas. We're not I don't have all the answers. And especially those that have gone through this process, right? Who better than someone who's gone through the process to really highlight the inefficiencies of it. So that's how things work in a nutshell. That's my story. I'm gonna turn it over to you for questions. There are no dumb questions. Like I said, you'll be surprised by how many so-called learned folks don't know, and our policymakers don't know how the clemency process works. I'm gonna get you first. That way I think I'm harsh.
I'm just gonna say, by the show of hands, if you have a question with your hands. I have a hand here first. You ready?
Is it that heavy? I got
So what do you guys send to expunge or, to forgive it to the central repository for them to remove it. It's no longer there, it's gone.
Right. So here's how pardons work, right? So when the governor acts on your application, and even this has changed too as of December of last year. So when the governor acts on your application, we prepare what's known as a charter of clemency. It's a long scroll essentially with a gold seal. And it used to be if you wanted so it gets a little complicated here. Technically, if you get the pardon, you do not have to go through with the expungement. We notify FBI and state police that your record's been expunged. If any inquiry is made, subsequent inquiry is made to any of those agencies, no criminal history data will be yielded. Now, but I qualify that with, many of you may know the Pennsylvania Unified Judicial Portal. That's the one you can go on and look someone up in 10 seconds for free. Your record remains on that portal unless you get your record expunged. Now, it says very clearly on that portal that that information, those docket sheets are not to be used for background check purposes, right? But it's no checks and balances, right? So if I'm an employer or HR person, I want to keep my overhead low, well, I'm going to do a background check for state police and pay $20. I'm going to just go through the portal, and if I see anything populate, then I'll throw your application in the garbage. And that's how a lot of them do that. So I say that to say, once you get the part, and I actually didn't go through with the expungement part, and I have my concealed carry permit. I've gotten some, so that I was able to do that without getting that expunged. But if you care about your stuff being on the portal, as of right now, that is how that works. Now, in December or October of last year, there was a bill, House Bill 440, that was passed, and that it says it was automatic expungement. It is automatic expungement for those that are exonerated or acquitted, receive a full acquittal. But when it comes to pardons, essentially it's just sealing. So what we do now is automatically we'll remove your record from that portal, that free portal. So technically you don't have to do anything and don't have to worry about anything being flagged. And I'm gonna give you a funny story to this too. So actually, after I got the pardon, again, I didn't go through the expungement piece. I applied for an apartment maybe like 6 months ago. And so they flagged it and said, yeah, they denied you because of criminal record. So for me, the easy telltale sign for them getting that is you went to the portal. So I asked to speak to their investigator and said, listen, the portal says very clearly you're not supposed to be using it for background check purposes. And then I gave them my charter of clemency too. So needless to say, I now live in that apartment. But think of how many people that they flagged, right? Just using the portal. Yeah. And technically I could take civil action, right? But I'm not going to go through all of that for that. Everything was remedied the way it needed to be. But that's how it works. So technically, once you get the pardon, you're good to go. But if you, and even now, and so what happened with the law, House Bill 440, we have a year. Us and the folks that maintain that portal, we have until December of 2021 to put that automatic sealing process in place. So that's what we're working on now to do that. So, but once you get the pardon, technically, you don't have to do anything.
Question? Yeah.
I have like two questions. I wanted to know, like, is a drug case considered is still considered a violent crime?
No. So when we talk about, when I say nonviolent, non-sexual offenses, it wouldn't include any drug offenses. But one of the things that we do is we try to, and the lieutenant governor's he hates bureaucracy, right? So he hates for me to tell him, hey, we can't do this because our regs say this, or he's like, fuck the regs. We know it. Help people. That's his mentality. Are people being helped? Is this, so when it comes to that, I have discretion. So when we say we have expedited lanes or who would be classified as nonviolent, because even when it comes to gun offenses, right? Now I had a gun. I was convicted for a gun offense. I didn't use the gun. The gun was just under my seat. But but some folks consider that as being a violent offense, right? Just merely being in possession of it. So we have a little discretion when it comes to that, but when it comes to drug offenses, no, they aren't classified.
And then also I wanted to know, like, I have a friend that he recorded like an DUI case, but he was like coming to me about, since I got my partner, he wanted to know like the process, and I don't know, because I know DUIs are a little different the way they want. I think for like 2 DUIs though.
I mean, it really just depends. So that's the other thing we talk about what the board considers, right? The factors. So the first thing that they look at is how much, obviously the offense itself. The more egregious the offense, as we often hear too from especially folks that are convicted of sexual offenses, is that the misconception is that they aren't eligible for a pardon or they can't apply. Any and everyone can apply for a pardon, but obviously the more egregious the offense, the higher the bar is to clear with our board. So the same deal works when it comes to DUIs, right? So they look at the offense, they look at how long ago the offense occurred, right? And how much time has elapsed since then. I know our corrections expert, Harris Gubernick, he's more clinical. He's more clinical board member. So he's looking at patterns of behavior. So if you got a DUI from 5 years ago and you got another one 7 years preceding that, and 6 years, he's looking at this as a pattern of behavior and I don't trust in it. It's only a matter of time before that fourth DUI comes. That's kind of his mindset. So it really just depends how long ago it was, if there were any previous DUIs, and obviously when it comes to substance abuse, what he or she has done to address their substance abuse issues.
You have a question here, this gentleman here, and then you're being.
Yeah, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, man?
The policy for the pardon differ between state and federal.
Yeah, so that's another thing we put on our website. And that was something I always, right, my first week into this position, I always was like, I never see them doing like presentations on the federal side. Like I never see a clinic or none of that. And so I was like, let me find out who my counterpart was on the federal side. And it's actually a Black woman. Her name is Rosalind Sargent Burns. She's been in that position about 10 years. So a whole different process on the federal side. And that's actually on our website too, for folks that, because we do get a lot of people who've been convicted federally, and we want to be able to provide that resource to them. So yeah, a whole different ball game there. And then you heard me talk earlier, and she told me too, and this was 2 years ago, they have a backlog of 11,000 applications. And what she said is that the president has only acted on the ones that he's unilaterally issued. So the ones that have gone through the traditional pipeline, they're languishing. So a little bit of it is a different process. So if you are charged federally, you have to go through the office of the federal pardon attorney.
Gentleman here?
Yes.
Yep.
So, my uncle, he's been up Dallas for 40 years now. I talk to him every other day. He's constantly asking about me reaching out to your office because he filed. I just heard you say 2,100 applicants. What is that time frame looking like?
Right. So right now, realistically, it's about a 3-year process. So part of my job and what I'm trying to do now is create different lanes of review, right? So different categories of offenders should receive different levels of review. So we spending as much time as we spend on a commutation case for someone stealing a sandwich from Wawa 30 years ago, it doesn't make any sense, right? And furthermore, we don't have the personnel to do that, especially as we see this increase or this uptick in people applying. So, and then same thing with commutations too. One of the issues there's such of a backlog is because we don't have what's known as minimum eligibility requirements, right? So technically, you can be convicted of murder 2 months ago and apply for commutation. So most people that are applying are, I would consider, meritorious, and especially when we talk about lifers, they've served at least 20 years. I know Secretary Wetzel, his informal policy is he's not recommending any commutations unless that applicant has served at least 20 years on that life sentence. But what we have happen is, if you're saying that I'm not prohibited to apply, I'm gonna apply. And especially now with COVID, movement is severely restricted in prison. So you have even more time on your hands. And a lot of people are applying. We have a lot of people applying who were denied parole, and they want to, and since they, parole in Pennsylvania, parole is considered a privilege and not a right. You can't appeal your parole, but you could apply for commutation, right? And people are doing that. So what we're trying to do is create a mechanism, and we're in the process of doing that, is essentially where we're going to just have some mechanism in place where we screen out the unmeritorious applicants, right? There's some applicants you can see just on the face of the application that is a no-go. We literally have people applying for commutation who are in the restricted housing unit or the hold, right? So, but people are applying just because they can, and that does a disservice to those that are meritorious, much like the gentleman you mentioned. So we are looking at addressing that and having that mechanism in place.
You said you're taking suggestions.
Absolutely.
Start with the second degree. You started out with that. First degree, we know they committed a crime or claim it, or the state is claiming they committed a crime.
Right.
Second degree, they was just happened to be there, or conspiracy. And it seemed like they're easing up on second degree.
Right. Agree with you 100%. You heard me say earlier, last Friday we did a press conference. It was the Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. They conducted an audit on second degree lifers that were sentenced under second degree murder. And we had over half, I said 1,200, over half of them are 50 years of age or older, or considered elderly. And to your point, the vast majority of them had minimal proximity or participation in the actual offense themselves. So yeah, those are the ones that, as I like to call, low-hanging fruit. But again, this becomes a culture issue, right? So yeah, the lieutenant governor and I understand and agree, but we have some board members that they're still getting to that place, right? So that is, and I know for the lieutenant governor, he understands, he has made no bones about the fact he wants to commute as many life sentences as possible before he leaves in 2023. And part of what I said to him is that January 2023, so we're not going to be able to do that unless we have some mechanism to screen out the unmeritorious ones. So we are looking at that. Your suggestion is well noted.
Question over here?
Yes.
It's a nice mask you got there too, man. It's a nice mask you got there.
Oh, great. And yes, a couple of my brothers, I had it on company. But I just recently applied for a pardon. And to be honest, I've been, matter of fact, we booked buddies. I mean, we got booked the same time, got released the same time, 2005, 2010.
Okay.
And I walked off 10 years. And I've looked at pardons all the time. I did my research. I went online. I talked to lawyers. And everybody always tried to discourage you. Oh, you'll never get a pardon. It costs too much money. I got charged $10,000, $15,000, and stuff like that. But to be honest, I didn't pull the trigger until I read your story.
Right.
When I read your story, that next day I called my sister and told her I applied for my.
Well, you ain't paid that $10,000.
No, I didn't pay $10,000. What I say all that to say is that a lot of people just don't know that that's an option.
Right.
Especially here, being this city that's targeted for crime. Like this city is police. It's the only city here in this is where Delaware County and the state system feeds off of this city.
Right.
Okay, but nevertheless, I know the lieutenant governor is seeking senatorship.
Right.
And I know probably you'll be moving forward too. So my question is, if that happens, will y'all still have a direct impact on pardons? Because I don't want to get Rudy.
Right.
The reason what I mean is, y'all ever seen the movie Rudy?
Yeah.
When working real hard, and the coach says, you know what, I like you. I'm going to play you next season. Next season, the coach left, and then the new coach came and said, no, I'm not going to play you. So I say all that to say is, if y'all do move on to do bigger, better things, which I have no doubt, will y'all at the very least put somebody in place that has the same passion for second chances and pardons such as yourself?
No, yeah. Listen, so to address your first comment, I'm glad, and that's part of the reason why the lieutenant governor appointed, right? Many of you that are old enough to remember the old hair club for men commercial, where the tagline was, not only am I the client, I'm the president. And that's kind of what he wanted me to represent too. Not only did you go through this as an applicant, but you're also the agency lead, right? So and so I'm glad it's having that impact, and you're 100% right. Same thing for me. Even prior to me getting a pardon, I never knew anyone personally that received one. And I know I used to get the question too, I think from this might have been after I got the pardon, but the question was, what would I do? What was I going to do if I got denied? And I was like, I didn't really have a plan B, and I wasn't thinking that I wasn't, and that's the other question that may come up here is, when should I apply, or when am I eligible to apply? You heard me say there's no minimum eligibility requirement. So I usually tell people, if you don't feel confident or you don't feel like your application is a slam dunk, or you second guess that it is, you shouldn't probably put in.
Well, just what is this? If like myself, using me an example, I've been home since 2010.
Give me the specifics and I'll tell you exactly.
Okay, I got locked up for drugs.
All right.
Okay, that's my newest crime. I got crime that's older, like when I was younger and all that. But my newest crime, I got locked up and convicted for drugs. I did 5 years, 2005 to 2010. I've been home. I walked off 10 years. I got a very good job. I got my own business. I haven't been in no trouble with the law. I haven't been in no trouble with parole. I never had curfew, never.
Listen, you literally, if you heard me say probably maybe 20 minutes ago, you are a better applicant than I was when I put it. We talked about timeline being the same, right? So, exactly.
And I'm only saying that because your story is the tip. Like, I'm not rubbing elbows with the secretary before. You understand what I'm saying?
Right, they ain't in back my pardon, no. It was just to be able to get the institutional knowledge, right? And to also offer recommendations too, regardless of, but yeah, you don't have to, it comes down to merit, right? At least with this board. So you are a better applicant than I am. I think that, I think you have a great shot. And obviously I can't guarantee anything and certainly wouldn't, so I don't want to guarantee anything, but I think you have a great shot. You're a better applicant than I am. What I would do if you haven't already done so, letters of support go a long way here. You see who's all in this room. You got some heavy hitters, you got the TA, you got some heavy hitters here, right? And those are folks that can provide letters of support. And letters of support go a long way when it comes to parties. Some people discount the impact, but and I probably shouldn't say this, but most of our board members are more keen on who the letter is coming from than the content of the letter, right? Because they're looking at objective parties, right? And I usually tell people, don't get your family to send letters because, of course, your family's gonna say Brandon's the best thing since sliced bread. You never heard of hair on a lamb's head and all that, right? But to have an objective party or someone potentially, a DA, who could potentially, who are putting their character and reputations online, that goes a long way. And that's one of the benefits of this being a deliberate process, a 3-year process, is you can, even after you put your application in, you can always add to it, right? You can always add, you can send whether letters, whether they're academic credentials or whatever. You can always add and beef up your application and augment that. So when you do go before the board, you have a better shot. But if I was a gambling man, if I was going to Harris after here, I would put all my money on your application. I thought you had a 2-part. What was the second thing you said?
Yeah, that was it. Just that. Okay. I just want people that doesn't have your circumstance, meaning not in Harrisburg, right, that's coming from there, have a fair and impartial chance.
Oh yeah, that's what you said about when the lieutenant governor. So just to be clear, I don't plan on going with the lieutenant governor. I have no aspirations to work as in the Senate in any capacity. For me, and as I said, there are some things. There's some infrastructural changes that I want to see made before I leave here, before I even start looking to leave. And I don't think that we'll be able to do that I won't be able to do that by 2023. So I plan on staying, and whoever the next lieutenant governor is, I am at their mercy. But I like to think that I bring value to this office, and they would understand that it would be advantageous to keep me on as opposed to starting anew. But that said, in the event I do move on, absolutely, clemency will always be something that I will continue to deal with, especially from a policy standpoint. So that won't change regardless.
We're going to take one more question so we can cover. Okay. Yes.
Okay, this is a 2-part question. Okay, so where does the funding come to help with your board? I know that comes with taxpayer dollars. And then secondly, how would a private citizen help for you guys to get more funding? Like, can we petition Senate or Congress?
See, what's your name? I'll tell like her already. How can I help?
Chamberlain.
Okay, all right. Oh, yeah, all right. Yeah, so our funding does come from the legislature. Our line item is probably just under $1 million a year. Again, as I said, historically, and I've asked, my number 2 in the office, she's been there. Her name's Carla. I don't know if Carla's watching. Shout out to Carla. Carla's been there 25 years, and we've never had more than. Right now, we only have 6 people for the entire state, right? And she said since she's been there from the first year that she's worked there, we have 4 people, right? So we never really had a huge office, right? So while we have more people, to the brother's point, more people are applying, more people are taking interest. We need we need our personnel to increase commensurate with the increase of applications, right? At least to some degree. And that's something that, you know, the one benefit of working for the legislature, I have a good relationship with Republicans and Democrats, and I'm able, you know, it's a really an easy sell, right? It's not like I'm trying to scam the money. It's literally going to a legit reason or purpose, even on our website. You know, I'm a data guy. So we have a study report tab on our website, and we commissioned 2 studies. One study had to do with recidivism of the recidivism rates of those that go through this process, which is less than 2%. We looked at over a 10-year snapshot, 2019 to 2009. More than 3,000 people applied, and of those, and what happens is when someone does get a pardon, if they reoffend, we get alerted no matter when it happens. Whether they reoffend 10 years after that, we get an alert. So we're able to track that. And less than 2% of those that went through the process, not only the ones that successfully got the pardon, but the ones that went through and were denied, recidivated at a rate than less than that. So the data was less than 2% for those that were denied, and for those that received a pardon, less than 1%. So the recidivism rates are significantly lower than when you look at the national average, particularly if you go to the Department of Corrections website. They say themselves 60% recidivism rate. Usually that's kind of standard nationwide. So to be able to make that case that, hey, those that go through this process really have turned that corner, right? These are the ones, if you have something to look forward to. For me, that kept me on the straight and narrow wire, and you two can probably relate to. While that pardon was pending, you know, I was trying to be a choir boy. I didn't want to get no traffic tickets or anything. So that also, you know, so you have that deterrent factor too. So that allows me to be able to make that compelling pitch to the legislature. We were able to get the $500,000 we needed to go online. But to your point, we can always use more advocacy. So you can certainly go through your state legislator. Says Brian Kirkland. I don't know which committees he's on, if he's on the Appropriations Committee or not, but find out what committee he's on. The Appropriations Committee is the committee who ultimately is the one who controls the purse strings. But we'll definitely, I'll make sure I get a card to you, and because we want it to be a coordinated effort. We do the same thing with the Bar Association and other social justice organizations that want us to broaden our infrastructure. We let them know how they. But the first place to start would be with your state legislature.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring some things to our attention while Brandon was here. This meeting is about awareness, right? It's about awareness and advocacy. And I forgot one thing, right? There's some things happening here that most of you don't even know about, right? All of the people that are involved with re-entrance, we kind of all communicate with each other, right? I'm talking about to the highest level, all the way to Washington, D.C. So I communicate with this man all the time, with Side and Kevin. I can keep going on and on. We have a woman in here who I call her Mrs. Reentry, right? And I kind of forgot to even acknowledge her the way she deserved to be acknowledged, because she's been like in my reentry life now. Because women does not get the recognition that they deserve in almost anything in this country, right? We kind of forget. And working with people like Rabia Ahmed, who actually was Brandon's counselor in prison, right? I brought her here personally. I wasn't supposed to say nothing. I brought her here personally to throw it off, right? And we still stand firm. And I wanted to.
She was one of the nice ones.
I wanted to just say, Dawn, come here, Dawn.
That's right.
This one here, y'all don't know what's going on behind the scenes. This is the outfit she wore when Saad Solomon came to her when she was in her transition.
He gave me this outfit. I'm gonna tell the story because he got messed up.
Go ahead.
So when I came through, I'm a justice served individual. Came through the federal system. First night I got here, I was at the federal halfway house. So I came in, gave his introduction, and told us the services that he had to offer. You know, a little skepticism there. Invited us to come down to his workshop. Went to his workshop. Got me right on the right track. Resume, motivating, training classes. I said, I don't have nothing to wear. What am I gonna do? He brought me in this closet and said, listen, my wife brought some clothes down here. You look about her size, I think you can fit it. Here's the suit. First job,
job, and it was on from there. I wore this in his honor tonight. I just barely made it in. That's the story behind it. So support systems, the network, feed the community, it works. It's effective, it's much needed, and our passion is now reentry. Focusing on women, but also men as well. We just need this. Continue to help develop this. Continue to pour your energy, the fundings, everything that you can do for us. It's very important. Very grateful. Love you. It's real. It's real.
I wanted to make sure that I brought that up because sometimes the women, like I said, they don't get the recognition.
Our black women.
Well, black women especially. I mean, because they're one of the greatest percentage of people are being incarcerated right now in our country. And I'm not going to get into a data thing because most of us in here know about it. I just want to say that we have to start being more aware, right, on another level of this thing. I brought Brandon down here because we want to tell you about the other level we're trying to be at, right? We know reentry is going to be the hottest thing in this country right now. After COVID is over, they're going to be concentrating on reentry because people who are getting out of prison, right? They're going to need somewhere to go. And like I say, I'm going to repeat what Charlotte Plain says a lot, right? Reentry is everybody's business. Whether you've been incarcerated or not, you can be affected by it in some kind of way. Even if it's that thing that you might have turned somebody down for a job because they were incarcerated before and you don't trust them. So I just wanted to let everybody know, this is an awareness, this is a coming out awareness meeting about our team, right? Tara, Professor Linda, Sade, Dawn, and there's a few other people that we're going to be working beside. So I want to get this out here. So all of the people in here and on that television, right, know that we are coming to represent reentry in Delaware County in a great way, and we hope to make reentry a model for what we do. So I thank all of y'all for coming. I'm going to turn it over to Tara. She brought us in. She's going to lead us out.
That's right.
I feel like I should pray or something. Again, thank you. Thank you. And I just want to give another warm round of applause for Brandon, who brought so much. Again, as I'm learning all of this and partnering and it's just exciting to know that all of you can be a resource, regardless of your position. Community resource, in the DA's office. There's just so many of you that I just say thank you. It's so great seeing you, here. And a few of you said it wouldn't be the last time, so I'm excited to see some of you here again. And you're welcome anytime. Again, this room, you can come use our room. And I don't know if some of you took a tour before. There's little rooms back there for computer lab and classrooms and multimedia. You can come and take some photos. So thank you for coming. But one last time, and I know y'all might think I'm crazy, and never forget, but please take the food. Okay, please take the food. Okay, so again, if you guys want to take pictures or anything like that, you're free to do so, but I just want to again say thank you, and we leave in peace and love. All right. Bye. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.